Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. Who wins? Tim Tszyu, Errol Spence Jr.? Who you got winning that fight? You take a look at Errol Spence, man, shadow boxing, looking really good. The background is beautiful, man, right there on the ocean and everything. But but Errol Spence says he's just doing this for himself. He's not doing it for anyone else. Nothing. He's doing it for himself. He didn't want to go out the way he did. If he wins this fight, he may think about fighting the next fight. If he wins that fight, he may fight a third fight, but no more than 3. What he's doing is for himself. If he loses, he's done. So it seems like Errol Spence just wants to, just kind of see what he has left. Because the way he lost to Terrence Crawford, obviously that bothered him. It's something deep down that he knows maybe went wrong during the training camp. And just overall leading up to the fight. So this is his opportunity to kind of, regain some of that momentum, man, and some of that self-confidence, and to kind of right some of the wrongs that happened when he was getting ready, training under Derrick James. But the story is, Errol Spence is back. And I really think this is an all-or-nothing fight. I really do, man. He can't afford to lose. And there was something said that I thought was very interesting, because I actually agree with it. It was on I think it's called a Spit Bucket podcast. And I've been saying for months, the person who wins is the person who can hit the other one the hardest, because that's where you're going to see how they react. But it's funny to hear Breadman, a top-notch trainer, on this Spit Bucket podcast. Now, look, I am no trainer or anything like that, but I understand boxing. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't saying I understand it better than these experts, but I understand because I've been in the ring and I know how it is if you get hit and you get hurt. And if you hurt somebody, a lot of times going forward, a person can become a bit gun shy and they don't want to get hit. So when I said, it depends on who hits who the hardest, that's what we're going to know who, basically who wants it more. But he said something like kind of the same thing. Listen to it.
I think Earl is willing to suffer more for his win.
With a fight like this, it might just come down to balls at the end of the day, man. And I think Errol wins that category. Your thought?
Yes, I think Earl is willing to suffer more for his win.
So, you see, they're kind of saying the same thing, which is kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, man, this fight for both of these guys, it's about more than winning. You know what I'm saying? They're preparing for what many fans expect to be one of the toughest fights of their careers. Both of these guys have built reputations for toughness, pressure, the ability to fight through adversity. So this matchup isn't just about power and speed. It really comes down, to conditioning, discipline, tactical adjustments, and who can handle the physical and mental demands of a grueling championship fight, and who's willing to suffer more and take the most damage. So let's talk about all that, because I really think this is about more than winning, man. Spence doesn't care necessarily about adding another victory. For Tim Tszyu, I think he cares a bit more about the victory. But I think overall, both of these guys is really about legacy, career direction. For Tim Tszyu, maybe a championship ambitions. Errol Spence is more one fight at a time. I think they both are thinking about the public's perception. And I think they both want to show that they still belong amongst those conversations with boxing's elite. And they understand if they win, that reshapes the entire conversation around both fighters. You know what I'm saying? Now, for Errol Spence Jr., the big fish, this is a major, major step towards reestablishing himself among boxing's top names, and to somewhat erase, I'd say some of that disappointment that he had in himself, his whole team, going into that Crawford fight and during that Crawford fight. And it gives his fans an opportunity to see, okay, this is Errol Spence at 100%. Because, look, the reality is Crawford beat him. And even a healthy Errol Spence, I think Crawford beats him. But the way that fight went, we all was sitting there scratching our heads. Like, what happened to Errol Spence? But one thing, after he's come back and he spoke to Andre Ward on Andre Ward's Art of War podcast, he got to learn a whole lot. He didn't sound like he was making excuses. He was more just kind of explaining a little bit about what happened to him leading up to the Terrence Crawford fight. So I was glad we were able to get a lot of answers to what happened. But some people took it as him alibying and making excuses. I didn't take it that way. And that's why I understand why some fighters just don't even want to talk and do interviews, because fans are unfair. So how will he perform after the setback? That's what we're going to be watching. Can he still impose that trademark pressure? We're gonna find out. And can he compete at the highest level against another elite opponent? You know, if he can come out and he can do this convincingly, that's going to answer a lot of questions. And for Tim Tszyu, look, although some people may say, well, Errol Spence isn't the same fighter. If Tim Tszyu beats him, that means nothing. Nah, that's bullshit. Because for Tim Tszyu, he defeats a fighter like Spence. With that resume, man, shit, Tim Tszyu, he going to be up and away. Because that will strengthen his standing on the world stage, because now he has that big name on his resume. He got that big fish feather in his cap. So it will show I think it will show how he can defeat another accomplished champion and continue building his own legacy, which for Tim Tszyu, a lot of people have doubts about what he can do going forward, especially after the losses to Fundora, Murtaza of changing trainers. And they're just looking at him like, man, Tim Tszyu is he's a bit behind the power curve when it comes to trying to build his own legacy. He had a good run, but they just feel like Tim Tszyu peaked. And when he stopped fighting the Australian fighters, then that's where he got into tough battles and he didn't fare that well. But I tell you what, I like Tim Tszyu, Aussie, oi. I like Errol Spence Jr. It's a 50-50 fight, and I think fans should expect a tough fight. Both of these guys have reputations for determination. Neither one's going to quit. You know what I'm saying? They've shown the ability to fight through difficult moments, maintain pressure, compete in physically demanding contests. Because of those traits, many fans expect an intense battle. I do too. But it comes down to who's willing to suffer more. Who gets hit really hard and says, I don't like this feeling, and they up and away. Because it's going to be physically demanding. You know, championship fights, I mean, it requires way more than just punching power. You know, if you want to win that fight, you got to be willing to suffer. You got to show endurance. You got to be able to recover between rounds. Your body has to be conditioned. You got to have ring discipline. You got to maintain focus under pressure. So I think even those small differences in conditioning can become more important as the fight progresses. And one thing about Errol Spence, he always comes in shape. Ronnie Shields knows how to develop fighters and develop champions. He's done it. With Tim Tszyu and his coach, Jeff Finnick. Jeff Finnick was a beast when he was a professional fighter. But I'm not quite sure, you know, what he can do as far as training someone. But they say that he was a quality fighter. He has a brilliant mind, and they expect him to have the best Tim Tszyu show up in the ring this weekend. Now, all that's great, but who is going to show the mental toughness? You know, we talk about punching power, we talk about physical ability, but what about the composure? What about the mental qualities? You know, who's going to come in there and maintain their confidence, show patience, have that tactical discipline, can follow the game plan, who can adapt, who's going to be able to remain calm if they get hurt, if they get knocked down. So I think overall that mental toughness, I think it comes down to who makes the better adjustments to gain the edge. And then I think it comes down to who can control that pace, who can dictate the rhythm. Now, I have a tough time seeing Tim Tszyu dictate anything to Errol Spence, but we don't know what we're going to get from Errol Spence. But if Errol Spence can establish his preferred pace, he may be able to wear Tim Tszyu down over time. But you know, at the same time, if Tim Tszyu can force Spence into uncomfortable exchanges, he can create opportunities of his own. So again, 50-50. But the body attack. Both fighters have demonstrated effective body punching during their careers, but everyone knows Errol Spence is a body puncher. and he will invest in that body early. And if he can do that and be successful, he's going to influence when Tim Tszyu does and doesn't move. He will influence his stamina and the punch output later in the fight. Now, the body attack, they both have a pretty good body attack, but you got to say Errol Spence has shown a better body attack than most fighters, and I would think that he would be able to get the upper hand if we're having if they get up into like a body attack battle or competition in the ring. You would think that Errol Spence would win that battle, and that leads into the championship rounds. You know what I'm saying? If Errol Spence is able to sustain a body attack on Tim Tszyu and they get into the later rounds, I'll tell you what, that conditioning for Tim Tszyu and decision making is going to become more important. He's going to know when to move, when to clinch. He's going to have to slow that shit down, man, to get his win. If this fight is close, you're going to have some problems because it's going to be decided by the activity. It's going to be decided by accuracy, ring generalship, who can finish strong. You know what I'm saying? So this is really a 50-50 fight, man. They both know it's all or nothing. Tim Tszyu sounds like he really wants to continue boxing. Errol Spence sounds like, he may or may not. But although Tim Tszyu is fighting for legacy and to continue his career, Errol Spence is fighting to answer those questions that he has, to fight those demons that he sees every day ever since the loss to Terrence Crawford. And I think it's even deeper for Errol Spence. I think he looks at himself and goes back to the car accident, all the drinking he was doing and the life he was living. I think he thinks about all that and says, damn, I made some good money, but I kind of threw my career away. I could have gone a lot further, and maybe that fight with Terrence Crawford wouldn't have gone that way if I would have taken better care of myself and not lived such a reckless lifestyle. So Errol Spence is fighting for something that Tim Tszyu doesn't know anything about. As a matter of fact, most people don't know anything about what Errol Spence is fighting for. That man's gone through a lot. And for any of y'all saying, nah, he ain't the only one who's been through something, yeah, I hear you. I mean, unless you've had a near-death situation, or you died and were revived, or you had something along those lines, you shouldn't be talking. Because that shit that Errol Spence went through is absolutely crazy. So I guess the ultimate question is, I think fans often describe fights like this as a battle of will. I like to say, we're going to see what happens when who gets hit really hard. Or like Breadman was saying, who's going to suffer more. But I think in reality, who's going to emerge victorious here is going to come from a combination of just showing skill, preparation, conditioning, maybe strategy, mental resilience. I really do. I think the fighter who best manages those factors under pressure, I think they have the strongest chance of winning. And it's really all or nothing, 50-50. Who's willing to suffer the most? I don't know. That's why I'm so excited about this fight. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.